Welcome to the fiddlehub.com free lesson series. In previous bowing lessons, I've covered the grip, I've discussed the sweet spot, I've talked about why the bowing angle is so important, and I've demonstrated a straight bowing motion. In this last bowing video, I'll show you some practice aids that should help you tie everything together and get you moving on the road to a smooth bowing style. I'll start by demonstrating how to use a cheap, disposable household item to transform your bowing. What I have here is a piece of cardboard tubing that I got from a roll of paper towels. Instead of tossing it in the trash, you can use this tube to practice your bow stroke. It will force your bow to stay on a line at the correct angle to the strings. Here's what you do. Pick up your fiddle and put your bow on the strings. Get comfortable and take a hard look at the fiddle and bow so you have the bow location and the angle in your mind's eye. Now put down the fiddle and with your left hand hold the tube firmly right where the bow was and at the same angle. Now put the tip of the bow into the tube and bring the bow up about halfway. If you keep the tube nice and steady, you can work on the mechanics of your bow stroke without having to think about whether you're keeping your bow at a 90-degree angle to your strings. The tube is forcing you to do just that. Let's talk about the mechanics and break down this motion. Say you're at the bottom of a bow stroke and you're about to change direction and bow up. The first thing that moves is the wrist. It changes direction first. Only after the wrist has changed direction and started up does the hand move. Think of the wrist as leading the way. At the top of the up bow, the same thing happens in reverse. The wrist changes direction and starts to head back down, while the hand is still moving up. The wrist is calling the shots. It's always in the lead. The hand and the arm just follow along. Notice also that using the tube is forcing me to move my grip hand in toward my chest as I bow up and away from my body on the way down. There's none of that elbow back and forth across the chest thing. I couldn't do that if I wanted to. The tube won't let me. Now this is all about building muscle memory, about making your right arm, wrist, and hand repeat this strange motion until it starts to feel normal. If you really want to, you can practice the essentials of this bowing movement anytime, even if you don't have your fiddle and tube handy. Just bend your wrist and bring it up to your chin. Let your fingers relax as if you were holding your bow. Then bend your wrist out and down. After you complete the bend, push your wrist down and away from your chin and body. Keep your eye on your wrist and make sure it travels in a straight line in the middle of your body. Don't let it wander off to the side. Once you do it a couple of times so all the parts are in place, speed it up so that it's one continuous motion. You can do this anywhere. Well, maybe not anywhere. An airport security line would probably be a poor choice. But you can do it in your car at a red light, while you're watching TV during a commercial, just about any other time. Now, the motions I'm describing in these exercises are pretty exaggerated. Nobody bows the violin by actually bringing their wrist up to their chin. And once you start bowing up to speed, there won't be time to consciously separate the wrist and the hand motion at the top and the bottom of each bow stroke. As you play along with me in the tune lessons here on the site, you'll notice that for the most part, my leading wrist motion is barely perceptible. It's there, but it's very slight. You can hardly see it. I don't need for it to be more obvious, as long as my hand and wrist are in fact very loose. The point of these exercises is to help you break away from the natural tendency to lock the hand and wrist, to help you develop a smooth motion and bow straight. So how much motion practice is enough? Well, that depends on you. At a minimum, I recommend practicing the motion, with or without the tube, for at least 5 minutes before each and every practice session. Do this for at least a few days, and maybe a few weeks, until you see that it's becoming second nature. Then you can back off, and you'll know when to stop. Here's another tip. Whenever you're fiddling, whether you're at home practicing or playing out in public, focus your eyes on the sweet spot, on the contact point. Don't be afraid to glare at it. It's amazing how much this helps. For some reason, just staring at the place where you want your bow to stay does wonders for keeping it there. I do this myself, off and on, whenever I play, and I think it's a great trick. Before I leave the issue of bowing, I want to go back to the right shoulder for just a minute. Now, obviously, you don't want your upper arm to move back and forth in the direction of the bow stroke. But that doesn't mean you keep your elbow tucked into your side all the time. You don't. If you're bowing on the E string, you'll keep your elbow in pretty close. But as you move to the lower strings, you'll find it necessary to lift your elbow up a little, out to the side. Again, you don't want to exaggerate this, but you'll need to let the elbow move back and forth to some extent in order to keep the hand and the wrist free and fluid. Well, this completes the lesson on bowing for now. Of course, there's quite a bit more to bowing than I've covered here. There are several different rhythms, bowing patterns, and ways to attack the strings to get different effects. And I deal with many of these in the individual tune lessons, where a specific pattern or technique fits well in a particular tune. For now, I've concentrated on helping you to get a good tone with your bow. None of the rhythms or other bowing techniques count for much if you can't get a clear, dependable sound out of your fiddle. The techniques I've covered here are only means to help you reach that end. The objective is to get a consistent, clean tone. That's what matters. It just so happens that the best way to get that good sound is to bow in the sweet spot and stay there. If you bow straight and keep a loose hand and fluid wrist, you will be able to do that.